What's up, board game people? Today we're going to talk about hype, specifically centered around the hype for Kingdoms Forlorn. I'll warn you, this may become a bit of a rambling tirade, but I'll try my best to keep it under control. This will also be a bit of a post-mortem for my thoughts on the Kingdoms Forlorn campaign. As always, I don't work for any gaming companies, and any opinions I express are my own. If we disagree, that's okay. Let me know in the comment. I'd be interested in hearing your point of view. And if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and helping our channel grow. So, I've seen in a couple Discords and comment sections people asking for an explanation of the hype behind Kingdoms Forlorn. Some people just don't get it. They don't understand the draw of the game. That's totally okay. Others just can't quite put their finger on it and may want to validate or quantify how they're feeling. I'm going to begin by saying that I believe hype is mostly irrational by nature. Hype can be a tool. It can be a social cue, and it can be a nasty weapon when wielded by those out for only profit. I'll warn you here that I'm talking mostly about the hype for Kingdoms Forlorn, a project that captured my imagination in ways that few do, and a project that I firmly believe will deliver on its promises. If we go and talk about the hype behind some of these big IP games that have crashed and burned in the last few years, the hype associated there was weaponized, fake, and used only to turn a profit. I'm not talking about that here, but I will caution anyone that hype can be blinding, and you should always follow your head when backing projects. Do your own research. I could be wrong about Kingdoms Forlorn, but I do not believe it will be a letdown, and I'm certain this game delivers in the end. I find hype to be usually one part artificial, one part FOMO, and one part innocent excitement. I think I'll take these out of order, and I'll start with the FOMO, or the fear of missing out. I'm starting with FOMO because a large part of the FOMO is over now. The campaign ended in spectacular fashion on March the 8th. We unlocked what we were going to unlock. We sat and watched the funding total race towards the final stretch goals and pulled up a bit short. We unlocked one of the three knights though, the Great Ubar, Sir Uberk van Erich, the Ape Knight. And while that was amazing and almost seemed as if it wouldn't happen, it was still bittersweet what we left on the table. So we've shed some of that FOMO. The campaign is over. We know, or at least have a hint at some of what all we missed out on. But we also know that those things that they've teased us with will still show up one way or another. Into the Unknown plans to play the long game with Kingdoms. They've expressed in several places that this journey stretches on for the coming weeks, months, and years. Maybe we'll see some of that content trickle into the Pledge Manager, and maybe they'll launch a web shop and continue to release new content. And likely we'll see another Kingdoms Forlorn campaign launch in the future, but hopefully only after this initial campaign is delivered. It'd be easy to classify FOMO as artificial, but in my opinion, it isn't purely contrived. Many games that we follow and back on Kickstarter or GameFound never see the light of retail. In many cases, the only official channel we have to get our hands on the game is the initial campaign. So in light of that, FOMO isn't completely artificial. Once the campaign or Pledge Manager closes, that's it for some games. Now, those playing the secondary market will likely start to feel the FOMO rise again, especially after the Pledge Manager is open and closed or after the prices have begun to creep up. The secondary market becomes the last bastion of hope for getting our hands on hard-to-find games. The secondary rise of FOMO is completely normal and serves to keep that hype train a-rolling. So after we shed some of the FOMO, the next part of the hype has also died down quite a bit for the time. What I called the artificial part of hype is likely mostly subdued by now. Artificial hype, in definition, is usually that created by advertising and marketing of the game and campaign. You've possibly been living and breathing the comments for the campaign. You flip onto social media and the meta spies have been listening, and within seconds you run across an advertisement for the campaign. Every YouTuber, their dog, and their dead grandma is making videos about the game. You're inundated and surrounded by it, by choice or sometimes by happenstance, but either way your poor brain hasn't had much of a breather for the last few weeks. Beyond that, it might be the talk of your friendly local game store or your gaming group. Whatever the source, it's likely that once the campaign ends, they're off to the next best thing, and this era of hype is being swept away and replaced. It's fake. It's artificial. Just because hype can be called fake or artificial doesn't make it a completely bad thing or an evil tool that marketing departments wield against us with no benefit. We often take hype as a social cue. Sure, hype is a marketing tool. It's super effective, but when wielded correctly, it can make or break a campaign. It doesn't necessarily make it evil. Let's look at Kingdoms Forlorn. Leading up to the launch of Kingdoms Forlorn, Into the Unknown released the rulebook for Aeon's Trespass Odyssey. That, for me, is a big hype moment. Suddenly, everywhere I turned, everyone was talking about how good the rulebook is and validating the excitement I still harbor for that game to be delivered. Most of us sat thinking that if I'm this excited about this game and its rulebook, let's just wait for the next new shiny campaign launching this week. This is going to be even better. Completely irrational and contrived? Yes, but effective. Suddenly our friends or the people around us were excited, and we allowed ourselves to be excited as well. I know quite a few people who had no idea what Kingdoms Forlorn is, or who Into the Unknown is before this campaign, but they stumbled on a YouTube video about it, got interested, and pledged. Hell, I'm sure this is even still happening. People are finding out about the game and anxiously waiting for the pledge manager to open so they'll have a chance to join in. Hype can help us discover new games and ideas. It's a giant neon arrow pointing to something, and it isn't always misleading. Sometimes it's pointing us at something that will genuinely excite us to the core. So part of the hype, I believe, is innocent excitement. I left this for last because it can be largely personal, and it's harder to explain. And this is where I really can explain why Kingdoms Forlorn captured my imagination and spoke to me. We all have deeply personal tastes and predispositions that will cause us to become excited about something. Hype feeds largely on this. These tastes and predispositions are also why some can be immune to hype as well. Kingdoms Forlorn fits snugly in my favorite genre of board games. I love dungeon crawlers. I came into them with Descent First Edition, and I haven't looked back since. Before dungeon crawlers, I was into RPGs. I came up as an adopted son of a school teacher. We didn't have money, and when we did, it was mainly for food. I learned at a young age what few dollars I could scrape together would go much further at a thrift store or garage sale. When I was in, let's say, about 3rd grade, I stumbled across an old box set of AD&D at a garage sale that came with small paper maps, a rulebook, and a short campaign. I absolutely ate it up. I grew up loving fantasy, dragons, and knights in armor. I played AD&D by myself while listening to the soundtrack included in the box. I was the GM and I was the band of merry wanderers. I had friends, but getting them to sit still long enough to play anything more complicated than Connect 4 wasn't going to happen. I eventually moved on to board games. Sometimes I could get my friends to sit for those. I found an old copy of The Dark Tower at a thrift shop. Again, I was mesmerized. The tower spinning and revealing different enemies and characters was pure magic to me back then. Part of my hype is in my deep connection to the theme and the genre. What really confounded me about the campaign and my feeling about it was something I couldn't quite put my foot on until the last week or so of the campaign. It kept introducing more and more characters. And I'm going to make a huge admission here. I usually don't play all the characters in a game. I don't tend to replay campaign games at all. So having 5 characters will usually suit me just as well as having 25. But each time they announced a character, I could feel that hype and excitement grow. It actually bothered me enough to wonder if all the hype was fake and I was just getting sucked into something that I'd later regret dumping a ton of money into. I kept looking at all the characters and I tried to put my finger on what excited me about having so many. What I found was each of these characters in the game have their own story. They're all questing for their own reasons, and largely their stories will be their own. But it is really the convergence of these characters that interests me. Each of these characters carry with them a fragment of a much larger story at hand. There's an arching narrative that draws these heroes together and binds them however tightly or loosely, and sets them on a collision course with destiny. Well, when I think about it like that, it sounds like a lot of the RPGs I spent my youth playing on the old PS1. Then it hit me. This collection of characters, these interconnected stories that can be played in no particular order, the fact that playing or at least adventuring with each of these characters would add to the enjoyment and total understanding of this huge story, this all reminded me of one PlayStation RPG that I loved oh so very much, but that time had made slip my mind. There's an old game by Squaresoft, before Enix put its finger into ruining things, by the name of Saga Frontier. This was one of the first RPGs I ever replayed after beating it. You see, in Saga Frontier, you choose a character or a story to play through. You play through the whole game, all the way to the end, just like any other game. You come across other characters who move in and out of your story, some having huge narrative impacts, and others just passing like ships in the night. Then, when you beat the game, you're returned to the main menu, where you see that list of characters to choose from all over again. You look over it, and you see some of the characters you may have met earlier in your last playthrough, and others that you might have just met at the very end of the game, and then some that you didn't even know about. And then the question arises, what were they doing before I met them? What brought them into my story, and how'd they get there? So you choose another character to play and find out their story is as different from your last characters as night and day. Saga Frontier had some masterfully crafted characters and character interactions that made learning the story in this looping fashion, one little piece at a time, much like peeling back the layers of an onion. Peel and peel each layer, and eventually you arrive at the core of it. All the pieces snap into place and you understand the entirety of that story. In Saga Frontier, the impact and weight of those revelations was amazing. I guess it stuck with me all these years. I see a lot of similarity of how the characters and their stories are working together to slowly reveal the core of the tale, and from what I've learned of Kingdoms Forlorn, it's much the same. The knights all have a story to tell, a quest to complete, and playing them will begin to reveal the stories and secrets of the kingdoms, and through these revelations, the story of the world develops. The way to find out what the fog is, and who's controlling it, and how to stop it may be through examining what each of our knights bring to the table. They're the first layer of what has the potential to be an amazingly complex story that Into the Unknown is trying to tell. So if you distill all that down to the basics, that portion of hype that I described as innocent excitement, to me, it's the familiarity of the genre and theme coupled with a dash of nostalgia. This is the part of the hype that is deeply personal and will be different for everyone. It's the part of hype that sometimes can be hard to put a finger on. So if you're sitting and wondering why you're so excited about something, perhaps look inward to find an answer. If you can't find the answer there, it might be that the hype isn't real for you. You might be swept up in FOMO, or the hype may be artificially created by clever marketing and peer pressure. In the end, hype and the definition of hype will be different for everyone. Heck, I haven't played Saga Frontier in well over a decade. I don't even know if it really holds up after all these years. I do know that for me, the excitement is real. What we've seen and heard of Kingdoms Forlorn has kindled a childlike curiosity in me, and I want to know more. I want to experience it all. The sad fact is that it will be some time until we can get our hands on the game. And for now, the hype, excitement, and imaginative speculation is all we get for our money to keep us entertained. Hopefully this offers at least a little perspective for those who wonder what all the hype is about. This is what the hype is about for me. I have and will continue to follow the development of Kingdoms Forlorn, and you can always find any news I come across in my news videos. If there are any major announcements or new development, I will be sure to put out a video discussing them. Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far into the video, you deserve a cookie. I'd send you one, but the latest shipping quotes on a single cookie are in the triple digits, and COVID delays would probably push the delivery well into 2025, so you'll have to pardon me if I just say thank you instead. If you like this type of content, please be so kind as to subscribe and hit that like button. We want to grow and be able to offer more and even better content for everyone, and getting subscribers is the first part of doing that. Remember to back with your head, not your ego or your wallet. And most importantly of all, play something fun tonight.